Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. We are doing some more branded discussion today, and I want to do a bit of a comparison between Despia branded and Chimera branded to help out those of you that are deciding which one to get into. Like maybe you've decided you want to play the branded deck, but there's a couple versions and we don't really know what's going on. We want to compare them without having done a whole lot of testing, just to get an idea of where to even start off to figure out which one is better for you in terms of playstyle and budget and concerns about the future and that kind of stuff. So we're going to go through and talk about each of these two decks in all these categories that I have laid out here, and hopefully that will help you make some kind of decision or think about which one is best for you. All right, so let's go ahead and hop over and let's start at the top. Let's go playstyle. Okay, so playstyle is going to be, I'm going to call Despia branded combo, and we're going to call Chimera branded mid-range. Okay, and what I mean is that, like, Despia branded has just a ton of different pieces, and every hand is going to be different. Okay, whereas Chimera branded, you kind of know what you're getting when you see your hand. You can pretty much go for the same lines every time. It's fairly linear, Chimera branded, that is. Whereas Despia branded has a whole lot of different play lines, has a whole lot of different pieces that you have to put together. The order of your plays matters a lot more in Despia branded, and I think that's kind of akin to a combo deck where you want to order your card activations to optimize your board and to play through interruptions and so forth. Whereas Chimera branded is kind of just, you have your play. If they can stop it, they stop it. If they don't, they don't. And it's a lot more straightforward. So if comboing, if thinking through like big brain play lines is for you, then Despia branded is where I would recommend going. Whoops. Let me go ahead and center these guys. Whereas if you want something a little, I would say simpler probably even, then Chimera branded is going to be more your style. And as such, when we get over to the difficulty section, out of 5 stars, I'm going to give Despia branded probably 4 stars here, to be totally honest with you. Like, once you know your Despia branded combos, it will get easier, but learning those combos is a lot harder. And when we are talking about difficulty here for Chimera branded, we're going to give that, I think, 2 stars here. So I think Chimera branded is much easier. I don't know why I can't move this. Here we go. That'll do. Yeah, it's much easier, much simpler to get into. And if you're a newer player who is still kind of getting into the game, but you want to play a branded strategy, then I would recommend going for Chimera branded as kind of like a starting point, especially if you're just kind of learning your branded fusion combos. Then Chimera branded is going to be a lot more straightforward. So yeah, that's where we're going to put these difficulty ratings at. About 4 stars for Despia branded, and then 2 stars for Chimera. Now let's talk about going first uninterrupted. So this is kind of like, I would call it the ceiling of the deck. Like, if you open a hand, then you know, how good can your board possibly get? And I think it's about, it's pretty similar to the difficulty ratings actually. So for Despia branded, I would say there's a lot higher potential for going first than there is for Chimera branded, and that's really because of Gimmick Puppet Lock really just wins games. It's that's where uninterrupted comes in. Of course, if you can resolve Gimmick Puppet Lock, you probably win. So like, having a peak board for Despia branded is just phenomenal. There are just so many layers of interruption, whereas Chimera branded builds something, but your opponent kind of knows everything that's going on. If they have played against Chimera branded before, they're going to know what to do against it. But I mean, you still have the whole rip one card out of the hand in the end phase, which is pretty phenomenal. So for going first uninterrupted, I'm going to give Chimera branded, I think, 3 stars. I think it's a little bit easier to play through the interruptions of Chimera branded, but Chimera branded is far more consistent, and the hand rip in the end phase can be devastating. So this is where I'm going to leave the going first uninterrupted section. For going second, I am actually going to probably flip these in terms of rating. So For going second, I expect my opponent to have a few interruptions, and therefore I'm probably gonna expect my Branded Fusion not to resolve, which is a much bigger deal for Despia Branded than it is for Chimera Branded. So I think for going second, we're gonna have 2 stars, and for Chimera Branded, we're actually gonna have 4 stars here, just because of the amount of non-engine you can play in Chimera Branded is just so incredible that you actually have a much better chance at stopping your opponent from making a board, and if they make one, being able to break it or play through it and so forth. So I think Chimera Branded is a much better deck. If you need to go second, or if you lose dice roll and so forth, just because of the flexibility of the deck, because of the flexibility of non-engine, the ability to main deck a whole lot of going second cards, whereas Despia Branded just doesn't have the deck space for that. You have like probably 6 spaces for non-engine in Despia Branded, and you're probably playing Ash as 3 of them, and maybe like talents for the other 3 or something like that. So yeah, I think, Despia Branded has a lot of gas, and if you're not playing through it too many interruptions, it's possible, but chances are your Branded Fusion is not going to resolve going second, and that's a huge deal. So yeah, this is where I'm going to leave the going second ratings. All right, resiliency to hand traps. So if you get hand trapped, how much of a big deal is it? And I think this rating is going to be kind of surprising to me, this rating is going to be a little bit surprising. My thoughts, I think Despia Branded has come a long way in terms of dealing with an Ash Blossom on the Branded Fusion. So I'm actually going to give this 3 stars. I think there's a lot you can still do into Ash Blossom, especially with Triple Tactics Thrust, with Nadir's Servant, and so forth. I do think you can make a solid enough board through an Ash Blossom where, you can still play. You can still have a chance going first. Whereas Chimera Branded is actually in a little bit of a pickle. Like, if you get Ash on your Mirror Sword Knight, you just don't really have very much engine to go off of anymore. So, I mean, it's a lot harder to deal with Ash, or even like an Imperm on your Berfomet in Chimera Branded. Imperm is a lot bigger deal against Chimera Branded than it is for Despia, because of Branded Lost in Despia is going to be able to solve a lot of your problems. So surprisingly, I think Despia Branded is a little bit more resilient to hand traps than Chimera Branded. Granted, Chimera Branded can still have like both Branded Fusion and Mirror Sword Knight, so you will definitely end on something. But I think you can end on more in Despia Branded, even if you get ashed or impermed or whatever. So I'm going to leave that here, and let me know in the comments what you think about this particular rating. I think this is kind of surprising, or kind of like a hot take here, but I want to know what you guys think. Okay, cost. When it comes to cost, there's a lot of different like things you have to think about here. First of all, non-engine, like, do you already own it? Are we talking about cost of just the engine? Are we talking about cost of like the max competitive deck, or just like a playable one? So there's a lot of things we have to discuss about that. But for cost, they're going to be kind of similar, especially in terms of engine, because if we look at Despia Branded, let's think about the most expensive cards. Now that Cartesia is reprinted and Lubellion is reprinted, that's not really a big deal. So we're looking at Guardian Chimera in the extra deck, which is like $30. We're looking at Guiding Quem in the main deck, which is probably 1 copy, about $25. And then everything else is pretty cheap. Alubers, Cartesias are cheap. Lubellion's $10, okay, but you only need 1. Branded Fusion. Of course, this is like minimum rarity. If you want to max rarity your deck, obviously Despia Branded is going to be more expensive. But for just the engine, they're about the same. The Chimera Branded main deck is like dirt cheap, but the extra deck stuff, 2 copies of Chimera King of Phantom Beast, that's $15 each. 2 copies of Guardian Chimera, which is pretty mandatory, those are $30 each. So I think we're on the same level of cost here for just the engine. Let's see. Cost of engine. And then in the same cell, we're going to do cost, including non-engine. Okay. And we're going to give these 2 different ratings actually. So for cost of engine, I think both are pretty cheap. I think both, I would say, 2 stars or $2 bill units here. For cost of just the engine, it's really not that bad anymore for either of these decks. However, if we're talking non-engine now, if you want to play an optimal Despia branded deck like max competitiveness, you have to play Triple Tactics Thrust, and those right now are like $80 a pop. So if you want to play max competitive Despia branded, we're talking quite a few dollars here, up to four. We're going to go up to four here. And then if we're talking the optimal non-engine for Chimera branded, now we're talking what? Prosperity is probably the only expensive card. We have like Triple Tactics Talent. You're not playing Thrust in Chimera branded, really. So I think that is more so on the 3 out of 4 mark. That's not what I want. Let's give it a $3 bill units. Here we go for the cost with the non-engine. And if you already have Prosperities, then we're only looking at the 2. And if you already have Thrust, we're only looking at the 2. Like, it's really not that bad. So, it depends on what non-engine you already have. All right, great. So now on to the next couple of, categories here. I kind of have 3 more, and they're all relevant to like future play of the deck. Like, if you're worried about buying this deck and then it's just all of a sudden not playable anymore, and if you lost a whole bunch of money, that's kind of what we're talking about in the next 3 sections. So format to format playability, for that means, how affected is it by what the other decks are in the format? And really, I think both of these kind of shine, and they shine for different reasons. First of all, Despia branded doesn't really care what any other deck in the meta is doing, because it can just play through anything going first. The board it makes is pretty consistent, no matter what the other meta decks are. Like, no matter what is going on, you're making a Mirror Jade, you're setting up branded in red, you're trying to set up Albion the Sanctifier maybe with Gimmick Puppet, you're setting up Grand Guignol in the graveyard. Like, it doesn't really matter what the other decks are, you're doing the same stuff every time. For Chimera branded, it's kind of the same. You're doing the same stuff every time because your interruptions are so generic that it doesn't really matter what the other decks are. You're going to hand rip every time. You're going to set up Mirror Sword Knight in the draw phase. You're going to have your onboard negate. You're going to go for Rinbrum if you can through your branded fusion. And you're just going to play non-engine, whatever non-engine you want to accommodate the meta. So because Chimera branded is so flexible in the non-engine, I think it's very playable format to format. Because Despia branded doesn't play any non-engine, it's also very flexible format to format. It comes to the decks that are kind of like where your engine is affected by the other stuff. Like, for example, Tearlament was kind of unplayable during Kashtira format because of Arise Heart. So, neither of these decks really are affected by stuff like that too much. So yeah, pretty much you're safe to play these decks, whatever format you want to play them in. For future support, here we're going to have a difference between our decks. I think future support for Branded is going to be pretty limited because the lore has run out for the whole Albaz thing, and they're not going to release any more anytime soon. We've seen this, for example, with I don't expect any new support for like Sword Soul. I don't expect any new support for Sprite anytime soon. I don't expect any new support for if we rewind back to like the Shadal and Burning Abyss era, like those are all kind of one core set, and they didn't get support for a long time, and I think the Albaz and Despia support has run out for now. So I don't expect very much support for Branded or any new cards really that you're going to be playing in Branded besides non-engine or maybe some kind of generic fusion monster. Whereas Chimera Branded, it's featuring a new type of monster. It's featuring the illusions, and there's barely any illusions released, and I think there's going to be illusions released going forward for a long time. It's also accommodating to any new beast cards, any new fiend cards, any kind of non-engine that is one of those types. and I think there's going to be a lot more Chimera branded support coming. So if you are looking for something that you can change going into the future quite a bit, I think Chimera branded is going to be for you. And now let's talk about Banlist risk. Both of these, pretty much the only risk to these guys is if Branded Fusion gets hit, and I think it's going to be a huge hit to both. Like whether or not you think Branded Fusion getting hit is a big deal to Chimera, as of right now, without Branded Fusion, this engine would be crap. To be totally honest, you would lose 3 of your 9 starters, and I think a Branded Fusion hit would make both decks almost unplayable. However, I think because Despia branded has so many ways to search Branded Fusion, it's actually less affected by a Branded Fusion hit than a Chimera branded. Then Chimera branded is affected by a Branded Fusion hit. I think Branded Fusion is a much bigger hit to consistency in Chimera than it is for branded Despia right now. I think we could see that change if Chimera branded gets kind of more starters, or more things to use Chimera Fusion with, where Gazelle is a reliable starter and so forth. So right now, if you're playing Chimera branded, the standard version, not like Runix or anything, where you're kind of relying on Branded Fusion to search your stuff, then I think Branded Fusion is a big deal. Whereas for Despia branded, if Branded Fusion goes to 1, you still have Alibers, you still have branded openings. You have you can switch to branded Synchro with still just 1 Branded Fusion, where you're relying on like Quem and Bestials to kind of start your plays rather than a Aliber or branded opening and so forth. So I think actually it's a bigger risk Branded Fusion going to 1 for Chimera branded here. But other than that, I don't really think that Branded Fusion or anything else could be hit that would affect Chimera branded that badly. Maybe Prosperity going to 1 might do something where it's going to also only hit Chimera branded. It won't really hit branded Despia. So, this is where I'm at right now between these 2 decks. It's kind of up to you how much you, or which deck is kind of more your play style. Which of these factors is most important to you. I'm not going to tell you pick one or the other. I think they're both great choices, but I think there are a lot of things you have to keep in mind when trying to decide which one of these to go with. So with that being said, we'll catch you guys in the next one. We'll see you later. Think about subscribing to the channel. It's free. It supports me. Like the video. Leave a comment what you think about these ratings, and we'll see you later. Thanks, guys.